The Click R3 podcast is brought to you by the awesome community over on Patreon. To learn more about supporting the show, head over to spawncastnetwork.com.
To circle back to the original point, right? Like, I think this is more illustrative of like some concern going into PlayStation 6.
Yeah, we can get into that. Yeah,
this is a console you don't like. You don't need it, and quite frankly, I think for an enthusiast box, like the metric we have for PS4 Pro, right, is like 1 out of every 5 PS4 sold at the time was a Pro. Like, I don't know if they'll be able to match that ratio at this price tag. That's
no, I think I'd probably like 1 out of 8, 1 out of 10, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
for this.
You're asking a lot from even like what is on paper your most engaged customers. So, I mean, that aside, I just think it's more reflective of, because this is a half-step console. PS6 has to be better than this. And if we don't have any MSRP cuts for the next 3-4 years, which that's going to be the end of the generation, like, where are we going to be with PlayStation 6?
Yeah, that's kind of the issue, because remember when the PS4 Pro came out, they didn't technically go up in price. They dropped the price of the PS4, released the Slim model, and then they had the PS4 Pro slot in at that standard $400 price they set. They've gone up in price technically with the PS5 revision digital one. They went up to $449, so they did move that up in price. We saw the controllers go up in price recently. We saw them move the games up to $70 to start the generation. We've kind of been working, and then throughout this rest of this generation, we've kind of been working in the wrong direction. We should have cheaper systems by now, and we don't technically, like MSRP, right? Where they're like, hey guys, we're dropping the PS3 went from what, 600, Ryan, down to 300 in 4 years or something.
Would have been 3. Yeah.
3 years. Yeah. So, but like that was quick, right? They basically ended up cutting the system in half in terms of pricing in about 3 or so years. And then, of course, that was the interest, was trying to sell more systems. And it does make me wonder about Sony's position a bit in the market right now. It does kind of, everything's kind of stacking, like the evidence we have of the way Sony is acting right now, kind of becoming overconfident Sony maybe a bit right now is how it feels, because the last time I really feel like this happened was when they wheeled that $599 price point out onto the stage and they were like, look at this. And it kind of feels like we're sort of back to that again. Like they must be in a position where like we can kind of do whatever. And like Concord was a disaster and they keep selling systems. Like, man, we can't miss right now. What happens? What happens if, like, almost like it was what happens if we try to sell a $700 system? Let's find out. Because
let's find out.
Isn't this kind of that moment in R&D where you're like, you know what? The price is too high for this. I understand you want to do it, but realistically, how much sense does this make at this price? And they go, you know what? You're right. Let's put it back in the hopper for a bit. We'll revisit this in a few years when we're thinking about next generation. We'll live with what we have, because again, the price point is a big thing for console gaming, because the idea is you get a box that is reasonably priced, we'll say, and it can do a lot for that price point. It usually punches above its weight class, right? It will typically run higher end games and it will upscale, but it will get to 4K, or it'll performance mode get you 60 frames. And then it's the developer's job to get as much as they can out of that hardware over an extended period of time. And now it just feels like we're just off the rails. It's like, whatever, here's $700, buy it or not. We don't care, because what are you going to do? Because, well, okay. That's kind of how people, I guess most people will just say, you know what, I'll stick with my PS5, and Sony will be like, all right, cool. That works for us. You can stick with the PS5. We're going to sell whatever we can here. And, you know, Ryan, I mentioned the PS6, but I also wonder, going into that generation, how do you feel right now with that wall and a half of games behind you? I can see that the enthusiast console is currently positioned without a disk drive.
If you're asking that, I'm still not concerned.
Okay.
And the reason for that is this thing can take a disk drive. They're not offering one with a disk drive, because then it's just absurd, because you know it's going to be like $649 at that point, because they would clearly offer a price savings for the differential, kind of like they're doing right now. I'm not worried about the disk drive. So the thing I think about with like PlayStation 6, and maybe this is more, not to explain away PS5 Pro's an absurd price tag. I feel like this is a scenario where, like, as you say, they just put it out there and they'll just see what they can get away with. But the underlying context here is because it's low volume. It's not like a new machine. Like, they don't have to loss lead with it initially. Like, the model almost always is, we're going to lose a little bit initially. Economy of scale will come in. We'll also offset with game sales. And like, that's not what the Pro is going to be. And that's not what it's supposed to be. So I assume the sort of bean counters in the back are like, no, this thing out of the gate, it's going to make money. So at 700, they have to be at that point, because obviously it was going to be more than a standard console. But I don't think they're looking to like sell it at 600 and loss lead with it. They don't have to. That's what you're saying. But with PlayStation 6, they would be in a position where they would likely have to loss lead again. And the other angle that I would hope this is the case, right? There's still like a lot of fabrication plants that have to come online by like 2028, 27, somewhere around there, right? So in theory, wouldn't you hope by then, like, bill of materials for like a lot of technology products are going to start coming down, or hopefully come down? That's because it's not like this isn't isolated to Sony, obviously. Like, everything's getting more expensive nowadays. It's just more a matter of how much are consumers willing to accept before it just becomes too much. And this is an environment where like consoles have almost always been seen as the very budget friendly option. These aren't like smartphones where like the consumer habit there has like changed, where, you know, people don't even bat an eye at dropping $1,300 on a phone. So it's a very different kind of place. And like you said, I think Sony is in this position where they're unchecked. If anybody's going to move the needle on this, it's them, and they're kind of so far getting away with it.
I think so for the PlayStation 6, my thought looking at this PS5 Pro is we would expect the PS6 in 2028. I think that's a reasonable assumption at this point. Okay, 4 more years, boom, we'll have it come out. They'll probably have been promoting it that entire year. So we're probably really like 3.5 years away from them maybe making some sort of formal announcement for a PS6. And my concern here would be is that in 2028, they've just normalized that price point and they're closer to, say, doing $600 and $700 versions if they want to still have a disk drive. Right. So I'm thinking it's 600 for the digital maybe. And then they're like, oh yeah, there's also this disk drive you can buy. It's like $80 or whatever. Okay. So that's 680 technically. And the reason I say that is because I was thinking about the PS, because we really only have one other generation this happened in, right? With the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. And I looked at it, I said, the PS4 Pro was $400 when it came out. They kept that price point going. The PS5 digital was $400, but the PS5 disc base unit was $500. So they kind of leveled and then went up. And then I look at the Xbox One X and that was $500. And then the Series X was $500. So it felt like we kind of kept that price point going like consistently. And I almost wonder if this is them just kind of stepping up now and like, okay, is the PS6 going to be $600 just out of the gate? And that's where we are now. It's almost like the mid-gen refresh. Yes, it's there to step up graphics, but also kind of step up price expectations. And unless Microsoft shows up with something that's just incredibly compelling, why wouldn't I price the PS6 at $600?
Yeah. No, you're right. I mean, that's the concern. If the consumer habit starts to shift and this thing, let's say, actually does well, but I'd be hard pressed to say it will. Like, we just talked about the ratio thing. I find it hard to see this thing doing the same ratio as PS4 Pro.
Did you see the analyst who believes it's going to do about 13 million units? I
thought I said 1.3 for this year.
Ampere
analysis. I thought it was 1.3 million for the remainder of this year, as in they'll sell.
Well, what was the PS4? Because they think it's going to be the same as the PS4 Pro ratio.
They think it'll be similar ratio.
1.3 million. Yeah, 1.3 million. But they believe it's going to be a similar ratio. So what did we thought? We thought the PS4 was 1 out of every 5, right?
By the end of the life cycle, you mean?
Yeah. So they think it's going to be
Because that's the thing. The official number, or rather, the official ratio we got from Sony was 1 out of 5. But the Insomniac breach did give us a number, which was like what was it, 14 million, 13, something like that?
Yes, it is something like that. Yeah, right around there.
Oh, did I get stuck?
You're stuck.
Uh-oh. The Insomniac breach showed us what it was, like 14 million or something like that.
Mhm.
Wasn't a lot.
Right.
So yeah, I guess it's more a matter of how many if PS5 Pro will stack up to that number.
Yeah, that's I mean, that's what they seem to think it'll get there by the end of the life cycle. So investors seem really excited about it. They saw their stock like spiked up quite a bit when the announcement of the price happened. They're just going to generate more revenue. It's going to happen. They sell some of these things, they're just going to get more revenue in. So there's excitement, at least on that side of the capitalist side of the world. But to me, the whole console gaming thing is getting a bit off the rails right now with the pricing and our maybe even expectations, because my thing now is, Ryan, when they showed that PS5 Pro, I didn't see a lot of, no one was that impressed online. Was that just me? I looked around and I said, man, no one's like looking at this going, this is incredible. How are they doing? Like, I'm not seeing that kind of excitement around visual quality. And I think we just are, that diminishing returns is really kicking in. And it really does become, what do you do now to potentially sell a PlayStation 6 and beyond? Because I don't think you can zoom in anymore or pitch 8K to people.
That's what I keep bringing up a lot with this console generation. We hit it. Like it's been hit. Like I would argue when you're buying a PlayStation 5 nowadays and you're coming from PS4, you're enjoying like higher frame rates, higher resolution. You're enjoying fast loading. Like that's it. Yeah. Right. Yeah. I mean, there's not even that many publishers anymore that can make an Alan Wake 2 or a Ragnarok or a Forbidden West, I mean, these games are so far and few between anyway. So it is a very weird spot. That's why, it's still an enthusiast box. You don't have to buy this thing. You don't have to buy it if it was 600, right? Because you'd be totally fine and served very well with a standard console. This is also why I thought we really were going to maybe go the cycle without seeing a Pro machine, or we could have gone the cycle without one.
Oh, I think we definitely could have, yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing too is like, if you don't do one, you give yourself some room for, the problem you're suggesting, which is by the time you get to PlayStation 6, how do you market that, right? You're already sort of removing potential gains. At a certain point, it's very incremental. But I guess on the other spectrum, it's a matter of some people being okay with that, which is, consoles are in this weird, not even weird, but, they're all x86 boxes. The dev environment's very simple and easy to port things around. And we hear that the SDK for PlayStation just gets more and more accessible. So it's easy to get things up and running on the hardware. And so it's more a matter of pick your poison. PS5, a Pro, a PS6 when it comes out, and you sort of get to choose your graphic settings from there based on the console you choose, right? And there's no pressure anymore to get a PlayStation 6.
Right. That is an interesting point you bring up, though, because the mid-gen refresh, that then next step to the PS6 will be just lesser. So because I thought about that with the PS4 Pro, like obviously we had a bit of a step up because the faster load times probably being the biggest thing, and then the frame rates just being higher. But going from that base 2013 PS4 to the PS5 would have felt like a generational night and day leap, like no questions asked. But it does make me think, okay, this PS5 Pro, what's the jump going to be to the PS6? I feel like it's not going to be that substantial unless they had some interesting idea in mind, maybe with AI as a way to change our experience, say in the way we game. But that's something for Sony to figure out, I guess, at this point.